The rain fell in steady sheets, soaking the streets of Washington, D.C. as night settled over the city. Streetlights cast a pale glow on the wet pavement, reflecting off the windows of towering buildings that loomed like silent sentinels. Amongst the bustling crowd, one figure sat alone, a woman huddled beneath a tattered blanket, her back pressed against the cold stone wall of an old church. Her name was Sarah, though few knew it anymore. To most, she was just another faceless shadow blending into the darkness, another homeless veteran lost to the system. But tonight, something extraordinary was about to happen, something no one could have predicted. As the hours passed and the streets emptied, a familiar figure stepped out from the crowd. His presence drew immediate attention, tall, imposing, with a sharp suit that stood out even in the dim light. It was Donald Trump, former President of the United States. He paused for a moment, glancing around before his eyes landed on Sarah. Without hesitation, he walked straight toward her. The sound of his footsteps echoed softly against the empty sidewalks, each step drawing closer until he stood directly in front of her. For a brief second, there was silence. Then, without saying a word, he did something that would shock not only those who witnessed it, but also millions more when the story spread. What happened next is a tale of kindness, redemption, and unexpected compassion. And it all began with a simple gesture. Sarah had seen her fair share of hard times. Once a proud member of the U.S. Army, she'd served 2 tours in Afghanistan, earning medals for bravery and leadership. But the war left scars, both visible and invisible, that no award could heal. When she returned home, the world felt different. Jobs were scarce, support systems fragile, and the demons of PTSD whispered relentlessly in her ear. At first, she tried to rebuild her life. She rented a small apartment, enrolled in community college, and worked part-time at a diner. But the stress piled up faster than she could handle. Medical bills mounted after an accident, and soon, eviction notices replaced her dreams of stability. Before long, Sarah found herself sleeping in parks and alleys, invisible to the thousands who passed by each day. That night, as she sat shivering under her thin blanket, she thought about giving up. What was the point? No one cared anyway, or so she believed. Her mind wandered back to happier days, to the camaraderie of her fellow soldiers, to the sense of purpose she once knew. Those memories kept her going, even if only barely. Then came Donald Trump. Love him or hate him, you couldn't deny his presence. As a businessman turned politician, he polarized the nation with his bold statements and unapologetic demeanor. To some, he was a hero, to others, a villain. But tonight, none of that mattered. He wasn't here as a president or a celebrity, he was just a man walking toward a woman who needed help. When he stopped in front of her, Sarah instinctively pulled her blanket tighter around her shoulders. She avoided eye contact, expecting judgment or pity. Instead, what happened next took her, and everyone else, completely by surprise. Trump knelt down slowly, his expensive leather shoes splashing in a puddle of rainwater. He looked directly at Sarah, his expression softening from its usual intensity. Without saying a word, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small envelope. Sarah's heart raced. Was this some kind of joke, or worse, was he going to lecture her about how she ended up here? But instead of handing her the envelope right away, Trump paused, studying her face as if trying to understand her story. "Ma'am," he began, his voice steady but gentle, "I know you don't owe me anything, but would you mind telling me your name?" For a moment, Sarah hesitated. Why should she trust him? What did he want? Yet something in his tone made her lower her guard just enough to reply. "Sarah," she said softly, still clutching her blanket. "Nice to meet you, Sarah," he continued. "Do you mind if I sit here for a bit?" Before she could answer, he lowered himself onto the wet ground beside her, sitting cross-legged like they were old friends catching up over coffee. The gesture stunned her. Here was one of the most powerful men in the world, sitting in the mud next to a homeless woman. It didn't make sense, and then, with a smile that seemed almost genuine, he handed her the envelope. Inside, Sarah found not money or a check, but a handwritten note. The words were simple, yet profound. "You deserve better. Let me help." Beneath it was a business card with a phone number and an address. At first, Sarah thought it might be a prank. How could someone like Donald Trump genuinely care about someone like her? But as she stared at the card, a flicker of hope ignited within her, a feeling she hadn't experienced in years. Just as quickly, though, doubt crept in. Was this real? Could she really trust him? And what exactly did he mean by helping? As Trump stood up and offered her a hand, Sarah realized she had a choice to make. She could stay where she was, clinging to her pain and fear, or she could take a chance on this strange twist of fate. Sarah stared at the card in her trembling hands. Part of her wanted to dismiss it as a publicity stunt, another attempt by Trump to grab headlines. But something in his eyes when he handed it to her made her pause. There was no smirk, no hint of arrogance, just sincerity. "Take your time," Trump said, sensing her hesitation. "But if you ever feel ready, call that number. Someone will be waiting to help." With that, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the night as quickly as he'd appeared. Sarah watched him go, her mind racing. Was this real? Could she really trust him? The next morning, sunlight broke through the clouds, painting the city in golden hues. Sarah still clutched the card tightly in her hand. After hours of debating, she decided to take a chance. Using a public phone near the library, she dialed the number scrawled on the card. On the other end, a cheerful voice answered almost immediately. "Hello, thank you for calling. How can we assist you today?" Sarah hesitated, unsure where to begin. "I calling about the note," she finally managed to say. "Oh yes," the voice replied warmly. "We've been expecting your call. Please hold for a moment while I connect you with someone who can help." Minutes later, Sarah found herself speaking to a woman named Karen, who introduced herself as the director of a local veterans support organization. Karen explained that Trump had personally requested they reach out to Sarah and provide whatever assistance she needed. Overwhelmed but hopeful, Sarah agreed to meet Karen at their office later that day. When she arrived, she was greeted with open arms and a mountain of resources. They offered her temporary housing, counseling services, job training programs, and even legal aid to address her mounting debts. But the surprises didn't stop there. Over the following weeks, Sarah discovered that Trump's gesture wasn't an isolated act. He'd quietly funded several initiatives aimed at helping homeless veterans across the country. Through these programs, hundreds of men and women like her were finding new beginnings. Still, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. Why had Trump chosen her specifically? And what did he hope to gain from all of this? As she delved deeper into the mystery, she uncovered connections between Trump's past and her own, a shared history that tied them together in ways she never imagined. Meanwhile, word of Trump's encounter with Sarah spread like wildfire. Videos of the incident began circulating online, sparking heated debates among the public. Some praised him for his unexpected kindness. Others accused him of using Sarah for political gain. For Sarah, though, none of that mattered. What mattered was the second chance she now had, the opportunity to rebuild her life and reclaim her dignity. But just as things started looking up, a new challenge emerged. Someone close to Sarah revealed information that threatened to unravel everything Trump had done for her and expose secrets buried deep within his empire. Now Sarah faced a choice: keep quiet and protect the man who helped her, or speak the truth and risk losing everything she'd worked so hard to achieve. The tension built as Sarah wrestled with her decision. On one hand, she owed Trump a debt of gratitude for giving her a second chance at life. His generosity had lifted her out of despair and put her on the path to recovery. But on the other hand, the information she now possessed could expose a web of corruption tied to his business dealings and potentially harm countless others. One evening, as Sarah sat in her newly rented apartment, staring at the evidence laid out before her, her phone rang. It was Karen, the director of the Veterans Support Organization. Her voice carried an unusual urgency. "Sarah," Karen said, "we need to talk. Something big is happening, and it involves you." Heart pounding, Sarah listened intently as Karen explained that someone within Trump's inner circle had leaked documents suggesting unethical practices in some of his charitable ventures. These allegations, if proven true, could tarnish the very programs that had helped so many veterans, including Sarah herself. "What should I do?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. Karen hesitated. That's up to you. If you go public with what you know, it could bring down the entire operation. But staying silent might mean turning a blind eye to wrongdoing. Torn between loyalty and justice, Sarah spent sleepless nights weighing her options. Finally, she decided to confront Trump directly. She tracked him down at a charity gala he was hosting, and waited until they were alone. When their eyes met across the crowded room, Trump raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised to see her. He excused himself from the crowd, and led her to a quiet corner. "You've grown stronger since we last met," he remarked, his usual bravado softened by a hint of curiosity. "I have," Sarah replied, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. "But I also have questions about the truth behind your charities, and whether they're really as selfless as they seem." Trump didn't flinch. Instead, he leaned against the wall, folding his arms. "And what makes you think otherwise?" For the next few minutes, Sarah laid out everything she'd discovered: the leaked documents, the connections, the potential consequences. The room grew silent as Trump absorbed her words. Finally, he sighed deeply. "You're right," he admitted. "There are parts of my past I'm not proud of, parts that don't align with the image I've tried to project. But here's the thing, Sarah, when I met you that night, something shifted. Seeing you reminded me of why I started doing this in the first place, to help people like you, who deserve better." He paused, meeting her gaze. "If going public with this means exposing flaws in the system, then so be it. But I want you to know that the good work being done through these programs is real, and it's worth fighting for." Sarah felt a weight lift off her shoulders. For the first time, she saw Trump not as a politician or a billionaire, but as a flawed human being capable of change. Together, they hatched a plan to address the issues head-on, while ensuring the programs continued to benefit those in need. As the news broke, reactions poured in from all corners of the country. Some praised Sarah for her courage, others criticized her for trusting Trump. But through it all, one thing became clear: their unlikely alliance had sparked a movement, one that demanded accountability and compassion in equal measure. In the weeks that followed, Sarah became a symbol of hope and resilience. She testified before Congress about her experiences, shedding light on both the successes and shortcomings of veteran support programs. Her story inspired millions, proving that even in the darkest moments, there's always a chance for redemption. Trump, too, underwent a transformation. While he remained polarizing, his efforts to reform his charitable initiatives earned him grudging respect from critics and admiration from supporters. Together, they proved that unlikely partnerships can lead to meaningful change. But as the dust settled, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. One night, while reviewing old files, she stumbled upon a name buried deep within the documents, a name she recognized instantly. It belonged to someone from her past, someone who had vanished without a trace years ago. Her heart raced as she pieced together the clues. Could it be possible? Was this person still alive, and involved in something far bigger than either of them realized? As Sarah reached for her phone to call Karen, a chilling thought crossed her mind. Maybe the secrets of the past weren't done with her yet. And perhaps, just perhaps, her journey was only just starting. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.